We're a little behind, and we are going to see if there's an opportunity to go into closed session, but let's go ahead and get this started. So we'll call to order, begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, and then the invocation. I do not see Director Ward here. Director Puckett, if you're not blinking from that pounding of the gavel. All right, if you'll join me in the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our most gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for another beautiful day in this Orange County area that we get to live in. We pray that you'll be with us as we conduct this meeting. Pray that you'll grant us wisdom and you'll protect our drivers. We ask these favors in thy name. Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, Madam Clerk, if you would call roll, please.
Chairman Young.
Here.
Director Bartlett.
Here.
Director Beal.
Here.
Director Ferguson.
Here.
Director Kring.
Here.
Director Martinez. Director Murphy.
Here.
Director Nelson. Director Puckett.
Here.
Director Rass.
Here.
Director Schopel.
Here.
Director Shea. Director Spitzer.
Here.
Director Voigt.
Here.
Director Ward. And Lisa Ramsey for Caltrans. You have a quorum.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Counselor, we have a potential closed session. Would you please announce that for us?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Subsequent to the posting of the agenda for this meeting, the agency learned that an action was filed entitled Borsuk, B-O-R-S-U-K, versus Transportation Corridor Agencies et al., Orange County Superior Court case number 812981-CXC. It is our recommendation, because it may be necessary to file a responsive pleading before the next regular board meeting, that the board make a finding that there is a need to take immediate action on an item that came to the agency's attention subsequent to the posting of the agenda, and that we go into joint closed session with the San Joaquin Hills Agency for that purpose. The closed session would be under Government Code 54956.9A, consultation with legal counsel regarding the pending litigation just mentioned. Very good. I will make that motion. Do we have a second for that motion? I heard a second over here somewhere first. Thank you. Director Voigt, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Looks like that carries. We will convene into closed session. Thank you, Mr. Joseph. For the San Joaquin had to run to another meeting, so I'm just going to open that meeting on their behalf. And really, Mr. Joseph, we're going to have you direct that meeting to allow San Joaquin to report out if there's anything to report out. And then we'll close that meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a brief report. While in closed session, the Board of the San Joaquin Hills Transportation Corridor Agency unanimously voted to authorize legal counsel to defend the action entitled Borsuk versus Transportation Corridor Agencies et al., Orange County Superior Court, case number 812981-CXC, in which the plaintiff challenges the constitutionality of various policies, procedures, and statutes under which the TCA operates, and also to represent the individual TCA defendants in that action.
Okay, very good. And Director Bartlett, you are a part of the San Joaquin Hills Board. Would you entertain a motion for adjourning that board?
Oh, that's correct. I will.
Okay, so motion by Director Bartlett, seconded by Director Ward, to adjourn the previous until the next regularly scheduled meeting of the San Joaquin. Very good, thank you. All right, that meeting is adjourned, and now we will open the Foothill Eastern meeting. And same thing, Mr. Joseph, would you please report out on the closed session?
Yes, Mr. Chair. While in closed session, the Board of Directors of the Foothill Eastern Transportation Corridor Agency voted unanimously to authorize legal counsel to defend the action entitled Borsuk versus Transportation Corridor Agencies, Orange County Superior Court case number 812981-CXC, and to represent all defendants in TCA defendants in the defense of that action, which arises out of allegations having to do with the constitutionality of the TCA toll collection procedures and statutes under which it operates.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Joseph. With that, for the Foothill Eastern, it is now time for the public comments. Madam Clerk, do we have any speaker slips? We do not. So we have finished with Roman numeral number 2, moving to Roman numeral number 3, the consent calendar. Directors, are there any items you wish to pull?
I would move the calendar.
All right. We have a motion from Director Puckett and a second from Director Kring. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? I will make a comment. People have complimented me. Thank you for the compliments of running an efficient meeting. Of course, we only know that's the case because the San Joaquin does all the heavy lifting ahead of time. But as efficient as I am, I noticed that the minutes, Madam Clerk, showed that we convened the meeting at 11:05 and adjourned at 11:05. As good as I am, I don't think we were quite that good. So to throw in an extra minute for the meeting or something, you would check that out. All right, we are moving now to item number 6 on our agenda, the audited financial statements, and Mr. Sherwood, welcome.
The audit of the agency's financial statements for the year ended June 30, 2015 was completed last week, and we have in attendance today Mark Thomas, who is the partner with KPMG, who is responsible for our audit. He has certain required communications related to the audit process that he would like to address to the board. And after he does that, either he or I will be available to respond to questions regarding either the financial statements that have been provided to you or the audit process itself.
Very good. Mr. Thomas, welcome.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Mr. Chair and board members. I'm glad to be here today. We've completed our audit of the financial statements of the Foothill Eastern Transportation Corridor Agency, and in that audit report that you have an unqualified or unmodified report, which is a clean opinion on your financial statements. The big news in your financial statements this year is the change in the medication payment, and then also the implementation of new accounting standards around the reflection of pension liabilities. There are a number of required communications, which I will follow up with you in writing so you have them, but just to report highlights of that. There were no significant items to report. There are no past audit differences. There are no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in internal controls, and there were no difficulties in performing the audit. If you have any questions for me, I'd be more than happy to respond to them.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Directors, any questions? Ms. Ferguson, please.
How would you account for the decrease in our overall revenue or investments?
Account for your overall decrease?
Yes, there was a slight decrease in the value of our investments and such.
Of your investments year to year. Do you want to respond to
I
that?
don't know if that's pertinent to this or not.
If you'll give me just a moment, I'll get to the numbers that you're referencing. Director Ferguson, I presume you're referring to our statement of net position and the comparison year to year of cash and investments. And that is primarily a function of the what was two factors. The biggest one is that we reevaluated the classification between current and non-current. So it's a little tricky in terms of how you have to look at two lines together and compare them. Yeah, to make a comparison year to year. So you would actually combine the cash and investments line under current assets with another cash and investments line under non-current assets. And we did reevaluate between this year and last how some of those investments were classified. There are a variety of other changes involved from year to year, but that's probably the biggest one that.
So if you were able to reconcile that, would we come out ahead or behind?
Well,
do you think?
Let me, if you'll bear with me again, I'll find the right item to refer you to.
So a big part of the cash really though was the 95 bond transaction that we refunded. So we utilized the capitalized interest account that was sitting in cash that was restricted only for the use of payment of those bonds.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were able to refund that whole 196 million of bonds with about 120 12 million, I believe it was, of cash, and then we also issued a small amount of debt. And that's where we were able to save the
So you
33.5 million in present value as
So
well.
you utilize
We did.
some funds for that purpose?
We did,
and
yes.
that's why it's
Yes.
down a little bit?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine,
Good.
thank you.
Very good, thank you. Director Kring, is that a
Oh.
motion that I was seeing your finger raised? I thought you had a question. Okay, well, you know, don't scratch your ear around me or anything else. We'll just make sure you buy that. All right, directors, staff is looking for approval of the audit. I will make that motion.
Second.
We have a second from Director Kring. Were there any other comments, questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Sherwood. Moving on to item number 7, the toll plaza facilities, the reuse study. This was a robust conversation at the last board meeting, but fortunately we have many crossover directors. Mr. Lowe, walk us through this, please.
Certainly. It's been a year since the implementation of all electronic tolling, and we are proposing to conduct a formal evaluation of how we can best utilize the 62 Foothill Eastern buildings and former cash lanes that are scattered throughout this agency's system. While the buildings primarily supported the collection of cash on the road, they're still used to support the electronic collection operations. This slide is an overview of the Catalina View Toll Plaza on your sister agency, the 73 Toll Road. Southbound lanes are on the left and the northbound lanes are on the right, and this picture was taken before all electronic tolling was implemented. On the left is a main operations building for the facility, and the small building on the right is what we call our satellite building. With all electronic tolling, we closed all but one of the lanes in each direction, and those lanes are used for trucks and slow-moving vehicles. And we have a similar situation on the Foothill Eastern Agency. This situation exists at the Windy Ridge Toll Plaza because of the steep grades that are in advance of the toll plaza. Next slide. So this slide is an overview of the Tomato Springs Toll Plaza on the northbound 241. At this location, we had no issues with slow-moving vehicles, so we are able to entirely close off the toll booth lanes, and this study will look at potential uses for these types of areas. Next slide. This is a breakdown of the types and sizes and number of buildings we have on the system. For the Foothill Eastern system, we have 62 buildings, and of those, 46 of them are toll booths, and 8 of those ramp toll booths are proposed to be removed, and we'll discuss those in the next agenda item. This slide is an example of an operations building at Tomato Springs North. It's a 3-story building. Typically, they vary in size all over the system. They typically have office space, cash counting areas, network and electrical equipment, break rooms, etc. But those are primarily used for the collection of cash. The satellite buildings, as this one is on Catalina View on the 73, is much smaller, but it has a lot of the same features as the main operations building. At the ramp toll plazas, we have a small utility building that typically supports the equipment for both sides of the toll road. And we have, and the toll booths themselves still house the electrical and tolling equipment, and some of those are planned for removal that we'll talk about next. The scope of the reuse study includes doing an assessment of all the existing conditions. It looks at brainstorming different ideas and proposals for the use of all these facilities, not only the buildings, but also the lanes and the space next to the lanes. And then developing a set of criteria and conducting an evaluation and ranking those proposals. The consultant will then put together a report and present it to the boards. So here are some of the possible uses we've been considering, including customer service operations, document storage, highway and toll system maintenance, and environmental stewardship ideas. So the next slide talks about the procurement process we went through with the consultant. We are recommending IBI Group of Irvine, which has experience in land planning, architecture, and transportation planning. So with that, the recommendation is to enter into a contract with IBI Group for this agency in the amount of $125,800, and we recommend approval.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lowe. Directors, let me see if I can summarize what happened last hour or last 2 hours ago. And I won't do service to all of the comments from our colleagues over there. There was concern that was expressed about, we're spending collectively between the two agencies about $185,000 to study what do we do with these facilities. Are there other uses? They thought, can't we come up with ideas on our own without spending that kind of money? At the end of the discussion, that board still unanimously approved a motion to recommend staff's recommendation. That's to go ahead and proceed with this. But I think staff received the caution, the warning through all the director's input of involve the committees, make sure that we're spending money wisely on behalf of the two agencies. And they were convinced that this study was still needed, but it was a very cautious type of a recommendation. So with that same caution, I'll make a motion that we approve the staff recommendation. Let me get a second for that, and then we'll have discussion. I see Mr. Craven wants to discuss.
Second.
There's a second from Director Puckett. Mr. Craven, please.
The additional requirement in the motion they proposed was to bring in CB Richard Ellis or similar to give us an assessment.
To
as well.
supplement, to help figure out if there's ways that we can make this a little bit more economical. Sure, very good. Okay, Director Ferguson and then Director Bartlett.
And the other thing that I was hoping would be included would be if there was to be customer service operations, that it would include possibly a credit card payment option.
Good. And I saw
Would just
Director
extend an
Craven.
extra way.
I saw Mr. Craven making those notes last time. Very good. Director Bartlett.
Okay, and part of the discussion for highest and best use was for reuse, was to look at the blacktop area where the cars are parked for possible electric vehicle charging stations, because that could help as we move towards the electric vehicles being used for the state of California and the push for that. Having those charging stations will help increase ridership on the toll roads, so that was a component in the last discussion.
One other
Please.
question, and that is, of these larger buildings, how many are there on the 241?
In 241, there's one at the northbound direction, the Tomato Springs Toll Plaza, one in the southbound direction at Tomato Springs, and the Windy Ridge Toll Plaza has a large building in the southbound direction and only a smaller satellite building on the northbound
We're
side.
really talking about 3 or 4.
Correct. There are some others on the 133 and the 261 as well.
Good. Okay, seeing no other questions?
Just a comment.
Please.
I still have a tough time supporting this idea, and the reason is, just looking quickly at the review of what we're buying, a big piece of it is an existing conditions assessment. I would hope that we already know what the conditions of the buildings are, and we're following a maintenance plan and that sort of thing. I'm really having a tough time wrapping my arms around why it takes this level of expertise and money. And if we avoided that internally, then I'm surprised the buildings are still able to stand up if they haven't been maintained for the last 20 plus years. I say that facetiously in one respect. In another respect, I would think we'd already have this kind of information. And hiring somebody or a group that has some visioning for alternatives for the future is one thing. But I don't know, we got to hire somebody to tell us the condition of our buildings, and maybe we have some other fundamental things.
Okay, point well taken. Thank you. Director Ward.
Director Young, can I correct the record? I don't believe it was unanimous. I think, Crystal, I think we had 2 vote against. Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you for that correction.
You're welcome.
Sure.
It wasn't unanimous, and some of the concern was that we have our toll booths. There's been someone that's already expressed interest in those, the Pomona Fairgrounds, so we thought, that was already kind of taken care of. But there was a robust discussion about the Tomato Springs building and what that could be, that maybe a private contractor would want to come in there and operate something, because there is a parking lot, and we know that there are real estate brokers that would help us with that. And we also, one comment that our staff would be able to tell us what they need out of those buildings or what they could use them for. So that's just kind of what the comments were.
Right, very good. And we discussed this at the committee level as well. And Mr. Lowe, help me out. Were the toll booths an appropriate conversation here, or is this only related to the toll plaza, this specific item?
Well, this study will look at the possible uses for those toll booths, some of which are going to be removed as part of the next agenda item. So we will look at the different uses.
Removed,
of course,
still used. And that's why it's appropriate study. Good. Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you, Director Wood.
Yeah, I'd just like to agree with Director Murphy on the cost of this thing, and
the short time I've been in government, the more I'm finding out how slow things work and how everything has to be studied. I do have some Marine Corps aviator buddies who I can call on some airstrikes and take those out at no charge. So,
Director Raz, thank you. I recall one of our directors last time was going to come back in the next life as a poodle, but decided to come back as a government consultant. So I think we've all had our shots. Well, with that, how about I call...
yeah, we have to do a study on that.
Park Avenue.
With that, how about I call for the vote? All in favor of staff's motion or staff's recommendation, please say aye. Aye. All opposed?
No.
Okay, they help me out, please. We have Director Murphy, Director Kring, Director Ward, Director Voights, Director, help me pronounce it, Big Bilodeau. It's going to give you an extra G, and Director Rath. That may not have carried.
I'd like to make a substitute motion
Okay, first, let me get the 6 and 6. Okay, so a nice even split. Director Kring, you have a substitute motion.
then. Yes, I would like to offer a motion that we execute with IBI, but pull out the one for the consulting for looking at how the buildings are maintained. Since we should, as Director Murphy said, we should have been doing that all along.
Okay, do we have a second for that motion?
Second.
Okay, there's a second from Director Ferguson. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye. Oh, well, that was...
All opposed, say no.
No.
No. Okay, is there another motion? We're split even on this item. So far we have no action, although we have another agency that took an affirmative action. Director Bartlett, please.
I'm concerned if we've got one board approving and the other. This is a joint project between the two agencies as far as the scope of work. How does that affect the overall project and pricing and scope of work if we approve it one board and not the other?
Yeah, there's definitely overlap in the tasks between the two, so it's not like we'd be looking at San Joaquin facilities in isolation from Foothill Eastern. So there is an efficiency in looking at them together. If I could make a comment on the inventory and condition, it's more of an inventory because there's a lot of equipment in these buildings. And particularly if we have to reconfigure the buildings, it's what do we do with that equipment? So it's not so much the buildings are well maintained, but it's how do you reconfigure them if you're going to partially demolish them or turn over part of it for another use and things like that. So it's not as straightforward perhaps as the title sounded of inventory and condition assessment.
Mr. Craven, thank you for that.
Mr. Chair.
If nothing else, I think this is a strong argument for item number 13, which is combining our boards as much as we can. Mr. Beal.
Just a point of clarification, if staff could help me out. Given the cautions that I heard from our chair and were expressed in the prior board meeting about the amount, this is a not to exceed amount. What amount do you actually contemplate we're going to end up spending if this were approved?
Well, certainly we would be managing each task, and once we feel we had answered the question, if you will, for the task, we'd move on. So it would be the way we manage it. I guess another point on that is this would typically be a task that we use staff to do, but as you recall, the engineering department is Juliet and Dave, and we contract out everything really in that department. And so this is another part of the philosophy that we don't have staff, a large staff here, that we contract out services in order to accomplish what we're doing. And this is an example of when that occurs.
More specifically, I guess, big picture, given the cautions that you've heard expressed by the directors on both boards, would you, if approved, do you still anticipate this is a six-figure charge to the agencies, or is it going to be significantly less?
I would say that we would not accomplish this without going over six figures. The scope that would need to be done in order to properly evaluate the reuse. Also, once we identify a reuse, you have to identify the process that we would need to go through to implement those ideas, which involves Caltrans, other agencies, zoning, things like that. So for whatever reason, I think it appears more straightforward than the scope really is here. And I'm satisfied that the value is there and what we would pay to get, and that we would get what we need to move forward with these. It's a lot of acreage that we're talking about that we have to figure out what to do with. That said, it's been a year since we did it, so this isn't a task that has great urgency. So if the feeling is we haven't provided you the information you need, then I think let us know that.
Thank you.
Director Bartlett.
Yeah, CEO Craven makes a really excellent point here. First of all, if you've never walked the toll plazas, directors, there's so much infrastructure down there, especially underground, and there's a lot of electrical, a lot of components down there that have to be taken into consideration. And then your point with regard to staffing, this probably wouldn't even come before us if we had adequate staffing, but then we would be paying hundreds of thousands of dollars more in internal staffing at TCA as opposed to a very efficient two-person department, and then we outsource for these kinds of scope of work. So I'd really like to have the board really revisit this item right now, because I don't think that when we voted earlier, we really kind of thought everything through about the staffing, internal versus the external outsourcing component. So this is really much more cost effective to keep the staff small here internally and outsource what we need to outsource.
Director Bartlett, thank you for that. Let me add, directors, if I may, and this will be an appeal for reintroducing the same motion as last time. At the committee level, I was the sole voice, if I recall, of throwing the caution flag, saying, gosh, this sounds like a lot of money. And as we discussed it at the committee level, staff said, well, we will come back to this full board with additional detail, which you have done. And they persuaded me that although I don't like spending this much money, as Director Bartlett just said, there's really quite a bit more work underground, so to speak, and literally as well, that needs to be done. So we're split 6-6 on the vote. The previous board did approve it. They didn't like it. Some still opposed it. Thank you, Director Ward, for pointing that out. Let me reintroduce the same motion, though. I would still like to have us vote one more time, because we're in an even vote, to follow in line with what the previous agency had done and recommend the staff recommendation, or to make a motion to approve the staff recommendation, but gentlemen, to do so cautiously. We want to make sure that you're spending our dollars carefully. So I need the second for that motion again. So Director Puckett again, let's take another vote if we may, please. All in favor say...
Can you
please, Director Boyce. Yes.
Obviously, action on item number 7, action is number 1 and 2. 2 actually gives a 5% increase if the CEO thinks that we need it, but the fact is that now I'm looking at it as these buildings aren't going to be moved anywhere. You got a 3-story building that's stuck on the side of the 241, and that's not going anywhere. The fact that we have to spend over just under $200,000 to have that evaluate what we're going to do with it. I mean, in time, someone's going to come in, whether it be wildlife or whatever, wildlife observation along the 241 or something, but I just think it's a lot of money for that. And then action item number 2, it concerns me that we're giving even access to even more cash to this, and so.
And point taken, Director Boyce. That would be the typical contingency that we put into all of our contracts because of potential cost overruns, and it's not saying that they are going to spend it. It gives them an up to, not to exceed. So the CEO has the authority to spend that if necessary. But remember, this is the study to decide what, if anything, do we do with these properties. One of the options they talked about last hour was to actually level and turn them into locations or areas for the extra sagebrush. There's all kinds of potential usage that we don't have the internal staff to be able to study. We wanted to go externally for.
Well, this $200,000 would actually be enough to bring sequoias down and plant sequoias along the 241.
You can do that too.
And the fact is, not to exceed, it's $125,800 plus a possible $6,290, which would bring us to over $132,000, not to exceed.
Agreed.
Okay.
Agreed. Okay, we have a motion, the same motion as we voted on before. Mr. Craven, please.
I think given the comments I've heard, particularly on the inventory and assessment, I would be willing to waive the contingency on this item and just approve the basic amount.
And we're hoping you're coming even under that. So directors, that will modify the motion to eliminate item number 2. And so it is just approving action item number 1, which is for this agency, the $125,800 for the study. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
And all those saying no, would you please raise your hand just so we can get the count appropriate? We have Director Murphy, Director Ward, Boyce, and you're going to help me again, Dennis. Bilodeau. Thank you. So 1, 2, 3, 4. That at least brought us to an approval. Directors, thank you for letting me force that through a little bit. And Mr. Craven, Mr. Lowe, you heard where both agencies really are. This is something that is of concern to us. So we look forward to you. Look forward to spending our monies very carefully.
Understood.
Thank you. All right, moving to item number 8, the toll booth removal, Phase 1 engineering design services. Ms. Sue, welcome.
Good morning. I'm Juliet Sue, Corridor Manager of Design, and the item before you is a request for engineering design consulting services for toll booth removals on our facilities. With the conversion to all electronic tolling, the toll booths on our system are no longer needed. Vehicles now travel at free flow speeds adjacent to the toll booths, creating a driving condition that may slow down traffic. Staff analyzed the toll booths and identified the toll booths at dual lane entrance and exit ramps, where traffic is adjacent to two sides of the toll booths, as high priority due to the narrower lane and shoulder widths at these locations. There are 13 locations with a total of 15 toll booths proposed for removal. 8 of those locations are on Foothill Eastern, and that's a total of 8 toll booths proposed to be removed on Foothill Eastern. The remainder of the toll booths at single lane ramps and the mainline toll plazas will be evaluated in conjunction with the toll plaza facility reuse study that David Lowe just presented. The study will consider, this slide 2. This is an example of the dual lane ramps. You can see that the lane on the right has narrower lane and shoulder widths. And the lane was originally constructed that way adjacent to the toll booth to facilitate the cash toll collection. The next slide is a map showing the location of the 13 toll booths that are proposed to be removed. The engineering design for the toll booth removals is phase 1 of this project. The scope of work for this phase is to prepare the plans and specifications, which includes design and details specific to each toll plaza location, reconstruction of the pavement in the area of the removals, restriping the lane lines, and doing utility work and investigation to address electrical conduits, fiber optic, sewer, and water lines that go to those toll booths. It also includes coordination with Caltrans on the design and obtaining the encroachment permit to construct the project. After the completion of phase 1 engineering design, there are 2 more phases that need to be performed. Phase 2 will be to relocate and reconfigure the toll equipment to accommodate the reconfigured lane lines after the toll booths are removed. The scope of this work will be developed in conjunction with the engineering design, and then the work will be performed by the agency's toll operator, Transcord. Phase 3 will be the actual construction contract to remove the toll booths. Both of these phases are conditional upon budget and contract approval by the boards, and we will bring these to the boards at a future time. A request for proposal for the phase 1 engineering design was issued to our 4 on-call engineering consulting firms. The on-call engineering consulting firms were selected earlier this year through a competitive procurement process. The 2 proposals were received, and the proposals were evaluated by the agency's staff, and it was determined that Michael Baker International, formerly RBF Consulting, offered the best overall value and provided a comprehensive work plan and professional expertise to perform the engineering design. So at this time, staff recommends issuing a task order to Michael Baker International for the engineering design, phase 1, in the amount of $231,068 for the Foothill Eastern corridor. And that concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Very good. Thank you. Directors, any questions? Director Boyce.
In your presentation, I think you said 13 booths be removed?
There's 13 toll plaza locations, and there's 15 toll booths total.
Thanks for the clarification. Now, will these be salvaged to use at other locations to actually move the toll booths, or actually destruction and demolition of the toll booths?
So they will not be needed on our system any longer. We don't need the toll booths. And what we will do with the toll booths themselves will be part of the reuse study that David Lowe discussed earlier. So we need to decide if if there's an entity that might want to buy them or what we need to do with them.
So in the bid that we have out right now with the RFP, is the scope of work to tear them down or to?
The scope of work for this is just the engineering design for removing the toll booths, and it wouldn't include destroying them or selling them. It doesn't include that.
So it's not the demolition of the toll?
No, it's not.
So the $230,000 is just to evaluate?
It's to actually prepare the construction plans for removing and reconstructing the pavement, restriping the lanes. So construction plans that would be prepared to Caltrans standards.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Director Boyd. In fact, if we can turn back 2 slides to the photograph, I think that's fairly telling. And again, this was studied more than 2 slides. Thank you for finding what I was after. One of our directors in the subcommittee was accused of the skid marks there at the bottom of that little hill being theirs. This is actually a safety issue for us as well, as you see how things begin to narrow. So the idea is to eliminate, but we have to prepare all the plans necessary to facilitate the elimination, and that's what this is.
Correct.
This is phase 1 of that.
Yes, correct.
All right, then I'll make the motion to approve the staff recommendation. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Director Bartlett. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Looks like it carries unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Sue. Thank you, directors. All right, moving to item number 9, origin destination data collection and analysis. Mr. Lowe, you're back. Welcome.
Mr. Chair, I'm willing to go through my presentation again, but I'm definitely open for questions if you'd just like to ask me some questions about the proposal.
We do have a few different directors who may not have heard, and I don't remember who was all on the subcommittee. Go to the conclusion.
Okay, certainly.
Give us the short version that way.
So what we are proposing is to perform an origin and destination survey using cellular signal data as well as GPS navigation data to try to find out information about our users, and not only our users but people who may be users in the future, that we could somehow market and direct our marketing strategies to convince them to increase ridership on the toll roads. We are recommending a consultant, one of our traffic consultants. They actually go to the third party who obtains this cellular data, and Fair & Peers is a traffic consultant we're recommending. And they would analyze this data and give us the information on origin, destination, trip purpose, trip frequency, if people are taking the toll roads to their destination, or if they're taking the alternative route to their destination, what time savings or time, longer times that they would have on the free routes. So it'll give us all that information, and we will use that for each agency to try to improve ridership, help with our marketing strategy, help us calibrate and refine our traffic forecasting model that Stantec uses, so that we can look at our capital improvement plan with good data-driven results that give us an idea on the best places to widen the roads and make them more available to increase ridership on the system.
Very good. Thank you, Director Lowe. Directors, I look forward to the day, back to item number 13, where we get to have our combined agency meetings, because there was some wonderful discussion on this item as well that took place last time that I feel those who are not on both boards miss out on. Again, let me summarize, and anyone correct me if I'm wrong on the summary, which again won't do it justice. The conversation last hour seemed to be less about should we do this. That was very clearly an answer by most directors. It was more about why are we not doing this in combination with our partners in Riverside and the Orange County Transportation Authority. And the answer from staff is we have been reaching out to them, but we have a need sooner than they do, and that's why we're taking a lead. But I love that conversation that took place, and I look forward to us all being able to have it. Director Bartlett, I took a note of yours. You talked about some of the, and I'm not going to call them best practices, but the different practices that happen at the different agencies. Director Bartlett sits, for example, at Orange County Transportation Authority, and said I'm actually skipping to a different one. I'm sorry, I was looking at the transponder. That was a different thing. Director Spitzer, forgive me, directors. Director Spitzer had a comment that was really the crux of most of our conversation of how do we work in conjunction with our other agencies? And I love that staff is focused on doing that and will continue to do so, but where we need to lead because of our timing, we will be leading. And so are there any questions for that? Let me make the motion again. We'll make the motion to approve the staff recommendation. Do I have a second?
Second.
And we have a second from Director Bartlett. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Looks like that passed unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Lowe. All right. I'm going to give Director Bartlett the credit on this next item, number 10, for the comment that she made, but we'll start with Mr. Johnson.
All right.
And we've studied this last month as well, so give us the abbreviated version, and then we'll have directors, if there are any questions, be able to tease out additional information from you if we
Okay,
can.
certainly, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
So this item was actually slated for the Foothill Eastern's board September meeting, but it was deferred because the San Joaquin board had presented some concerns that staff went back and addressed and worked with the Joint Toll Operations Committee to discuss. So the concerns were really around 3 key areas that we have addressed. The first one, as highlighted on the slide, was really understanding the projected customer demand and the need for transponders and the requirement for interoperability. So staff shared some key stats about how important this is to our operations. Fast track holders who use these transponders make up about 72% of our account base and 80% of our daily transactions. And then those same customers, they use other facilities outside TCA's toll roads. About 40% of them do, and 15% of our customers actually use the LA Express lanes up in the Los Angeles area. So that demand for interoperability is there. And also, as Mr. Kramer is going to report later with our traffic and revenue stats, we've had a lot of growth. So our demand for transponders on a monthly basis has grown from about 10,000 a month to about 16,000 a month. And that's created some inventory challenges that this item would help to correct. One of the big items that we worked to address, the San Joaquin board expressed some concerns about being locked in to the quantity that we would authorize. And they wanted to make sure we had contract verbiage that would allow us to say, 6 months from now, oh, we don't think we need that last 50,000 of transponders. They wanted to make sure we could cancel and terminate the agreement and not be committed to the cost of those. So staff has worked to address those with the vendor, and we have incorporated language that would be included in this amendment should the board approve it. The last item was about the value of the investment. Should we be investing in these transponders that use current technology when we know new technology is forthcoming? There were kind of 2 aspects of that. The state schedule right now will allow use of this new technology as soon as April, but for TCA to leverage that and really achieve the cost benefits, our other agencies, especially our neighboring agencies at OCTA and LA Metro and very soon RCTC, they have to be able to support the technology as well. So until their systems can read it, we can't roll it out in mass for our customers. So we have to take that in consideration. And then the other aspect was, well, when would these current if we buy these transponders, how long do we get to use them for? So that technology timeline for the state actually will require use of today's technology out till 2023. So we have several years that allow TCA to make sure we recoup the full value of the investment in those transponders. So with those 3 issues, the San Joaquin board did approve the item this morning. So we're asking the same of the Foothill Eastern board. And the action or the recommendation from staff is to authorize the CEO to execute an amendment with TransCore to procure transponders at a cost not to exceed about $3.3 million and to extend the contract term to through fiscal year 17. I apologize for not addressing that earlier. TCA, through our procurement, we have very competitive and aggressive pricing. And what we're seeing from our peers who are doing procurements now around the states, their prices are higher than ours, so we want to protect our pricing, and that's why that's part of our recommendation.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Directors, any questions?
I'll move staff approval.
All right. Director Puckett's made a motion, seconded by Director Kring. Any questions, comments? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? So it carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. All right, moving on to item number 11, the Strategic Research and Stakeholder Outreach Consultant Services. Mr. Chesney, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. My name is Mike Chesney. I'm Chief Strategy Officer here at TCA. The item before you is the Strategic Research and Stakeholder Outreach Consultant Services. Back in April of 2015, we launched a larger effort to assess opportunities for mobility improvements in South Orange County. The Foothill Eastern Transportation Corridor Agency Board of Directors previously approved the engagement of an experienced issues management and consensus building firm with knowledge of the region to conduct a community ascertainment study. The purpose of the study was to gather stakeholder input to gain insight into how best to work collaboratively to address issues that improve mobility within South Orange County and, more importantly, throughout the region. We're about halfway through that ascertainment study, and a draft report is expected to be ready after the first of the year. The next step is to bring on this strategic research and stakeholder outreach consultant to help us develop a strategic outreach plan. This firm will use the information from the ascertainment study and develop and execute a comprehensive outreach plan that formulates compelling messages and puts in place a program to inform the public about the benefits of finding a solution that will help reduce gridlock, improve air quality, and enhance mobility throughout the region. Again, this is a very deliberative next step in a larger global effort that we are undertaking here at the agency to understand how to promote positive aspects of transportation mobility solutions in South Orange County. The procurement for this was initiated with 297 firms being notified of this procurement. 64 firms expressed interest, 6 firms submitted proposals, and 3 firms, after evaluation, were then shortlisted and interviewed by TCA staff and 2 members of the board of directors. We are recommending the prime consultant Venture Strategic of Irvine, California, with their team of sub-consultants, which include Kurt Pringle and Associates from Anaheim, California, Smith Johnson Research, who are based in Sacramento, and DMI Direct, who is based in Lake Forest, California. This team was deemed to be the best qualified and had a comprehensive plan to accomplish our contract goals. This overall contract will be for 3 years, with this initial task order being executed. This task order is for a not-to-exceed fee of $472,000. The detailed scope of work for this task is in your staff report. All subsequent task orders after this will certainly be brought before the board for approval at a later time. This procurement was brought forward in the Joint Strategic Planning Ad Hoc Committee meeting on September 24th and the Foothill Eastern Mobility Ad Hoc Committee meeting on October 7th. That concludes my report, and I can answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chesney. Director Bartlett, please.
I was a member of the ad hoc committee for this item, and we basically interviewed the final 3 firms. They were each firm was $500,000 apart. I mean, they were really widespread as far as their dollar figures and what they would cover. We just felt that the best value covering the scope of work was Venture Strategic. I'm glad that we're going to break it down into task orders because with smaller chunks and based upon what happens with the first task order, that will feed into the next task order rather than just a huge dollar amount that's being allocated for the scope of work. So I think we are in a position now to move forward. The scope of work is very important to this agency, and I would make a motion to approve staff recommendation.
Very good. We have a motion by Director Bartlett. Do we have a second?
I'd like to,
Discussion?
for discussion.
Very good. We have a second from Director Ravs. Now discussion. Director Voigt and then Director Ward.
As your task orders, how often are they going to come back and give us reports on those task orders and communication to see where they are and to see how good they're doing out there?
Yeah, we anticipate quarterly reports coming back to both committees. Specifically, the Foothill Eastern Mobility Ad Hoc will be the main committee where we have those reports come back. And we have a deliverables list that is included in the scope of work, and so we'll have a progress report on those items.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Director Ward.
Okay. I just have some questions on procedure. Task number 1, all they're doing is reviewing and analyzing data. Is that correct?
That is
Task number
part
1?
of it. Yeah, let me get to the...
I was looking at it. Review and analyze community ascertainment study, which we're waiting on. Analysis of recent demographic changes. Conduct quantitative surveys. Is that with the future stakeholders, the bigger outreach that we're talking about?
It's part of it. It's actually just getting more information of the stakeholders in a region. And the stakeholders vary from neighborhoods to elected officials to businesses, schools. I mean, it's a whole gamut of stakeholders out there. And
So basically, we're hiring this consultant to go to the greater outreach,
the next step, correct.
past what the ascertainment study's done.
Correct.
What the very last task that was identified was project delivery activities. What is that? On page, I'm sorry, I don't know what, page 2 of 5.
Page 2 of 5.
Page 2. It's where you listed how they're going to engage the stakeholders. Project delivery activities, it's after Caltrans project development process. So what would that be?
Yeah, this is, we're highlighting what the steps will be in terms of the overall process for what this agency's taking. So if you look in the beginning, discussing with regional partners, we're doing that at various levels, outreach to the various organizations. And as you go down the Caltrans project development process and then project delivery activities, that's for a project.
That's what I thought.
That's for the end, the ultimate goal, yes.
So you're just giving us further tasks, but they are not in task 1. Task 1 is just them researching everything and developing how they're going to go through it. So that was my question, is when they are talking to the other stakeholders, that's not in task 1? So is that going to be additional funding?
No, this task order here is for the, I would say, 5 bullets that you see as part of the scope of work, which includes reviewing the research from the ascertainment study, taking that beyond and doing their own research and going to the demographic changes and quantitative surveys, also strategy development, also stakeholder outreach, also public media and social media crafting and outreach as well. All this detailed scope is part of that initial task order amount.
So basically overall, is their strategic, what they're trying to study, is that just to get the message out to provide a solution, that we all need to get together to provide a solution, or is they actually going to promote a solution?
It is to first understand if there is a problem and to go out and gather that type of opinion, and then to collectively engage in a discussion to find out what solutions are available. It is not to lead or provide a solution, but to see if there's a way for us to be part of that solution.
Okay, because the only line that I had with a problem with is that they are going to develop and execute an outreach program to inform the public about the positive aspects and benefits of finding a solution. So it seems kind of they're like a PR.
There's more to go.
Instead of just gathering, they're really trying to promote a solution. But we aren't going to actually tell people what the solution is yet because we don't know.
That is correct. And it's similar to some of the outreach that we've been doing separately with environmental groups and next with city elected officials, is starting with a clean sheet and going out and asking for ideas. And so I apologize for the poor choice of words in the report.
No, I'm trying to really figure out who they are and what they're doing so that I can report that back to my city. And it kind of seemed like they're going to gather, I remember the door tags, that we used to put out, that I don't know what consultant did that, but it seemed more like that's kind of part of what they're going to be doing.
Right, and as you can see, it's very deliberative. I mean, this is a next step, but we have many steps to go, but this is a very important step for us to now, with the information we're gathering, trying to understand what solutions are available. And not to be promoting one over the other, but we really need to gather ideas from the stakeholders.
Which is why it was drafted as a task order, so that each task would successively be able to speak into whatever the next task is.
And I appreciate that. And I do appreciate having them all listed here. That was very good. It's just I was having a little problem with what task number 1 truly was
No,
for 472. $1,000, so.
Great, I appreciate that. Director Bartlett.
And part of the task force, they'll be working, this firm will be working very closely with board members, the ad hocs, on strategy, on outreach, and on messaging. So it's not like they're going to be out there just working amongst themselves in the community and not working with the board members specifically here and staff. It's a collaborative effort.
And if I may add, also with the various departments here within the agency too, such as communications.
Correct.
Okay, any other questions? Director Ferguson.
Yes. It concerns me that the last stakeholder on the list is neighborhoods and residents. It occurs to me that they really should be first on the list. And it should be kept in mind that all of these other stakeholders are supposed to be working for the neighborhoods and residents. And in a sense, the way this is set up, potentially the neighborhoods and residents become outnumbered in the weighting of opinions because there are so many more of these groups that are called out and talked to separately, and then neighborhood and restaurant and residents is one small group. And I realize that everybody that is in another stakeholder group is a resident somewhere too. However, they're not speaking as a resident, they're speaking as a member of that other group. And in light of that, my hope would be that there would be a way that say 8 residents could be contacted for every one stakeholder of the other groups. In other words, some formula, some way to bring this back into balance, because I think one of the ways that we get out of sync and get into difficulty with the public is when we overweight the other stakeholders and underweight the people we're supposed to be working for.
Good point, Director Ferguson.
That would be my desire.
Okay. Mr. Chestnut, let me ask a question. On page 2 of 5, first, are this list is not in any sort of priority, is it? So we're not prioritizing one or the other? Director Ferguson, the good news is about a third the way through the page, we have neighborhoods and residents as one bullet
And
point.
I do see that.
Yeah, followed by city and elected representatives. So the good news is the neighbors are before the elected representatives. The better news is that businesses and local organizations come after the elected representatives, because being a young from Yorba Linda, I'm always dead last. So I actually got moved up above.
Right.
But this is not in any order anyway, right?
And I do appreciate that. What is the community ascertainment? Why is that put in particular?
Because we see that the neighborhood and residences, the community ascertainment study that we're doing now is part of that information that we need to gather. So beyond going with the community ascertainment study,
It's a very small sampling, isn't it?
we see it as a component, and it's so far we've had we'll end up with about 50 interviews. And
That's what I mean. It's very small. So, in order to do justice to the neighborhoods, you certainly would need to conduct a great many more.
Director Ward, please.
I think one way that could be accomplished and brought back is when you do your public outreach events, that we really bring, after you talk to everyone and clean it down a little more, you really bring everyone back in. And I think the public outreach events really need to be really important on the list, because then we have a little bit more info, the electeds have weighed in, the businesses have weighed in, so I think we'll bring them back in, I think at that point, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And,
So
and many points afterwards.
those can't be minimized, I think.
Right. And it doesn't look like that was ever the intent. So thank you for bringing that up. And Mike, thank you for your answer. Directors, with that, in the interest of your time, we have a motion on the table by Director Bartlett and seconded by Director Rath. Any other comments we need to address? All right, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
I have to abstain, Levine.
Okay, and we have one abstention. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chesney. Moving on to item number 12, General Counsel Legal Services. Mr. Cremens, looks like this is your item. Welcome to the podium. Or as we like to say, the hot seat standing above the trap door.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, directors, trapdoor. Okay, good. This item, General Counsel Legal Services Contract Amendment. At the August, we performed the annual Legal Services Review at the August Joint Legal Services Ad Hoc Committee. And during that review, there was a discussion of an adjustment in the rates for Nossman, who's been doing an outstanding job of successfully providing legal services to the agency. Just wanted to make sure we didn't lose our quorum right there, because we're right at the number right now.
All right, Mr. Joseph.
Okay. So, good discussion. The recommendation of that committee is to provide an increase.
Mr. Craven, if I may. Mr. Boyce, we might need you for a quorum purpose.
Okay.
Okay. Speak quicker, Mr. Craven.
Okay, committee recommended an increase in the rates for general counsel services. The current rates are $140 an hour and $65 per hour, raising those up to $240 an hour and $160 per hour, or $115 per hour.
If I may, I think we saw all that in the report. Is there anything other than what is in the report that we need to know about?
Just recommending.
All right, I'll make the, all right, we have no, Ms. Green beat me, so Director Crane made a motion to recommend, but I'm cutting you up. What is your motion, Director Crane?
Accept the staff report.
To accept the staff report. I have a second by Director Puckett. Any questions, comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Good. One more, Mr. Boyce, if we may. Thank you. Item number 13, joint board meeting. Anything outside of the report, Mr. Creeman?
Nothing outside of the report.
Nothing outside of the report. Directors, do you have any questions on that report? This is the next step towards being able to meet jointly with our two groups. I'll make that motion.
And I'll second.
And we have a second from Director Kring. I think beat you to the punch. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Mr. Boyce, thank you for sticking around. We still have your report, but I don't think we need your report for the quorum purposes.
And I was prepared and brought it with me.
And you brought it with you. Good for you.
Okay.
All right. Go ahead, Mike.
I'm happy to report for the Foothill Eastern Corridor in the month of September that transactions were up 9.2% for the month and revenues up 17.2%. And to put this in perspective, for the first quarter, which completed at the end of September, ridership was up 1.4 million and revenue was up 4 million. So a great first quarter for Foothill Eastern. That concludes my report.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Crayman. Directors, any other reports or comments from you? Seeing none, we're still inside of the 45-second spot. Are there any other closed sessions other than the emergency closed session that we attended to, Mr. Joseph?
No, Mr. Chair.
You have just earned your fees again. We appreciate that. And we will therefore adjourn until the next regularly scheduled meeting. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.